So I'm pleased to introduce our first speaker, Rick Kearbey or Kearbey? Kearbey. Thank you. Thanks for telling me. He's a veteran meteorologist with over 2 decades of experience informing the public about weather and climate issues, including on Good Morning America and ABC's World News Tonight. Rick has provided forecasts for the NFL Super Bowl, Major League Baseball St. Louis Cardinals, and the PGA Masters Tournament. And in the fun category, if you look up on his Facebook profile, he follows South of Spooky Paranormal. No idea what it is, but I'd love to introduce you, Rick Kearbey.
Thank you, Terry. That may have been a follow back. I don't know. I'm not familiar with that one, but that's great. Yeah, so I've had such a fun career working in broadcast television in Tampa Bay here for about 8 years. So covered a lot of hurricanes, and then about a year and a half now with Bob at the Climate Adaptation Center. And the reason I shifted here is because I think this is where the focus needs to be now. It's such an incredible subject that people need to be educated about. We all feel it. Bob says all the time, we are as ground zero as anybody in the world. You know, we're right at sea level. We have incredible heat. We live in a subtropical climate, so there's a lot to talk about. And we're going to talk about heat and the warming climate as it affects infectious disease. And this is really fascinating. I'm not going to get into the medical angle too much because I'm not a doctor. We're going to have 2 great doctors that will follow me, and they'll get into that. But you're going to find this very, very interesting on what's going on here. So I'm going to start my talk with Houston. We have our problem. And that problem, it's heat. And you've seen a lot of these charts. So I won't spend a lot of time on this. But if you go back to the pre-industrial era, and this is 1850 to around 1900, you see the trajectory we are on, and it continues to go up. And every year, it seems like it gets hotter and hotter and hotter. 2023 was the hottest year ever recorded for this planet. August was the hottest month ever recorded. And as we mentioned earlier, the nights are a lot warmer as well. And this is important because it doesn't give us a good sleep and recovery period. The buildings, we talk about heat islands, the buildings don't cool down as much. They're using more air conditioning at night. That only adds to the problem of carbon and the greenhouse effect and all that. The diseases, everything is so affected by these warmer nights. So keep that in mind. And you really feel it, I think, if you go out for a late night walk, you take the dog out. In the morning, we start out much warmer. It's really a significant part of this warming world. Bob mentioned earlier that this year will likely beat last year. Surprise, surprise. So we continue to break these records as we continue that upward trajectory. And it's almost a certainty this will be the hottest year ever experienced by human civilization. So let's talk about vector-borne diseases. And, doing this research, I learned a lot of interesting things as well. So I think you'll really like this. But warmer weather makes vector insects more dangerous. So we're talking things like mosquitoes and ticks. And if you look at this chart right here, it's rising temperatures that impact these diseases the most. So all of this has some impact, but rising temperatures are number one. So let's talk mosquitoes, because mosquitoes are big vectors. The Aedes aegypti is the primary vector that transmits the dengue virus. And you've heard about this, and you're going to continue to hear about this for years to come. This is something that's really increasing and becoming extremely prevalent in the Americas, especially South America, Central America, and we'll talk more about that. The female Anopheles mosquito transmits malaria. I'm not sure why it's the female. I'm not pointing fingers, but the female is the one that transmits that malaria. Maybe they get the job done better than the boys. But both of those mosquitoes, by the way, are here in Florida. Vector-borne diseases, they're infectious diseases that are caused by pathogens or parasites in humans. And what happens is a mosquito has its blood meal on the infected human, bites another mosquito, and that's how it's transferred. So these living organisms transmit this disease pretty easily, and you never know if you get a mosquito bite, if it's one of those rare mosquitoes right now, of all the mosquitoes, that could deliver a disease that definitely could cause some issues for your health. What are vectors in general? I mentioned mosquitoes, but ticks, fleas, flies, lice, rodents, animals, pets. Pets can get infected, and humans can be vectors, and humans can transmit the disease through direct and indirect contact. So, it could be something where you touch something, somebody else touches it, or you touch another person. Maybe you kiss somebody, hopefully your spouse, right? But that's another way these things can be transmitted. But what's really interesting is how warmer weather, how a warming climate affects these vectors. So one thing it does is it extends their habitats. So vectors are now surviving in places where it was previously too cold. So this is kind of in big part, a latitude thing where their vectors are extending north or south to north, but it's also an altitude thing. And Bob, who's here from Colorado? You were telling me about, and Alex, were telling me about mosquitoes this year for the first time at 9,000 feet. So that's warming as we go up. And so these vectors are extending up as well. So this is really interesting and really concerning to the science and medical world as we continue to see this. A warming climate also creates longer transmission seasons. So milder winters means that the mosquito season can lengthen, and we're seeing that in Florida as well. Has anybody thought it was hot here as we get close to Thanksgiving the last few days? It's been record heat, right? We've been breaking records. So the mosquitoes respond to that. Vectors respond to that. As we said earlier, they like warmth, and we're certainly seeing a lot of that. And as you go north a little bit, even in Florida, the overwintering, it's warming as well. So, more of them survive the winter. So you start out the warmer season in the spring with more of a population, and that exacerbates the problem as well. So increasing the vector population by warmer weather, this is really interesting because their reproduction rates increases as the temperature goes up. The reproductive cycles are higher in warmer weather. And also inside those vectors, the pathogens are more active and more effective as it warms. So it's kind of a double threat there. Changes in precipitation patterns, and wow, have we seen that. This year, we've seen, not only the hurricanes, but the extreme rain events around the hurricanes. And so when we get extreme rain and all of this excess precipitation, because a warmer atmosphere holds more water vapor, so it's capable of producing more and heavier rainfall when it happens. And so what happens there is you get more standing water, and of course mosquitoes breed in that and they like that. So we always preach about, try to get rid of standing water around your neighborhoods and your yard, and that'll help out the mosquito population in your general area. And then drought conditions. 2023 was a drought here. We went from a drought to incredible rainfall this past year. And that is also a big part of climate warming. So you get these extremes. You may have a drought in one place for one season or 1 year, followed by incredible rainfall. And so what happens when we get drought situations, especially in some third world countries, maybe where water sources are limited, it can bring mosquitoes and the population of humans closer together. And that can be a problem. I do want to highlight the mosquito. I don't like them. Does anybody like mosquitoes here? Absolutely not, right? And they're the number one vector. But do keep in mind, not all mosquitoes carry a pathogen. Not all mosquitoes will transmit disease. But you never know when that's going to be, and it is something you want to try to avoid, not just for the annoyance of having a mosquito bite, but you just never know when this is going to happen. And as we saw the trend with temperature, we're seeing the same kinds of trends with vector-borne diseases. So, that threat will increase as we go through time here and go into our future. The mosquito season, it's starting to expand a little bit. Typically in Florida, the mosquito season runs around March to October. Mosquitoes are most active when temperatures are in the 70s to the 90s. So that's about our mosquito season right now, but it is increasing, and it's increasing everywhere across the world. That is the vector. These are some vector-borne diseases. These are some notable ones we can talk about here in Florida. You've heard dengue fever a lot, and as I mentioned earlier in this presentation, but U.S. cases are 3 times higher than this time last year, and you see symptoms anywhere from fever, headache, body pain, rash, internal bleeding. Severe cases untreated can cause death. Malaria. In 2023, there were 7 malaria cases in Florida. Guess where they were? All in Sarasota County, every one of them. Severe cases, cerebral malaria, respiratory distress, and organ failure. West Nile virus, you hear that from time to time. And while that is currently not a threat in Florida as far as this year goes, we never know when that's going to happen. And with this increasing mosquito and vector population, it's going to be a concern. Encephalitis is another one, typically 1 or 2 cases possible, or typically happens each year. And here you could have an inflammation of the brain, and it can lead to death. So those are just some notable vector-borne diseases to keep in your mind. And when you're seeing articles or watching the news, remember those because they're important. And remember that we do have an increasing threat with this. Let's look at dengue fever again. So if you go from 1934 to 2009, there were, that entire period, 0 cases in Florida of dengue fever. We had 25 cases locally acquired this year. So you can see it's increasing here. Locally acquired means that a mosquito had a blood meal from an infected person here in Florida and then bit another Florida person, and now they have it. Those are locally acquired. Overall, there's been 581 cases that doctors determined in Florida. The rest of those would have been travel. So maybe someone traveled to Brazil or Puerto Rico, wherever it may be, they acquired it there. But 25 locally acquired cases. Oh, I want to show you that graphic real quick. So that chart right there is really interesting because that one there is for Nepal, which is interesting because Nepal is incredible. It has sea level land and it has the highest point on the planet. So they have it all. And they're spiking with dengue fever there. And while those aren't our exact numbers, these are the kinds of trends we're seeing here and we're seeing in a big, big part of the world. So that's dengue fever. It's huge in the Americas as a whole, so South America, Central America. You can see 10.2 million cases this year so far. There's been almost 9,000 people die from it. So this is a really serious threat that will be increasing here. We kind of look at what our makeup is in relation to, say, Central and South America, for example. Florida has about 6.2 million Hispanic or Latino people that originate from those countries. And so a lot of those people may go back and visit family and bring it back here. That wouldn't be locally acquired. But if they get bit by a mosquito and now you get it, that would be locally acquired. So that's a concern. Maybe people visit them. They don't know they have dengue fever. They come here to Florida to visit. They get bit by a mosquito. You get it. That's going to be a locally acquired. So that's kind of how that can happen. We also have about 1.5 million Canadians. So how is that interesting? Well, they are here. Maybe they go home or they have family come here and visit. And since we have an increased dengue fever threat, now they can take that back to Toronto or Vancouver. So that's really interesting. And keep in mind that we are a vector as well. It's not just a mosquito. It's just not the tick or these things because, as I said, we can also transmit these diseases through direct and indirect contact. So yes, we are a vector. So here's where you'll find the main mosquito for dengue fever right now. And notice the arrows going up. This is where that habitat is extending. This is that latitude change, it's going north, and we expect that to continue. And at some point, if we're not fortunate and do a good job with this, it could cover the country. So there's a lot to watch here. Research right now shows that about a quarter of the world's population that's not impacted by dengue fever right now will be in the next 50 years. And that's due to climate warming. And you may see scenes like this in downtown Sarasota. We do mosquito control, we spray. We see helicopters spray, they spray in water, they do different things. But this person here, I think this was Rio de Janeiro, they, in a hazmat suit, spraying surfaces because the threat is so big there. So that could be part of our future. Some stats for malaria. Last year, we had 7 locally acquired cases right here in Sarasota. And again, this is going to be a growing threat. In 2012, it was a big year. It's 65 cases, but they were all associated with travel, so they weren't locally acquired. So when somebody goes in and they test positive for malaria, they're going to get their history and then find out if they traveled or not, and that's how they're able to determine that. This year, there have been 12 cases of malaria. And which is hard to believe, but they are associated with travel. But it's such a travel-centric world we live in now these things can spread fast. We talked about the extended habitat of mosquitoes. That map right there, that is from Africa. That's Eastern Africa, and that's an altitude change there with mountains. And so you can see the increase there from 1972 to 2022 as they continue to go up. So that's going to be a trend as well. And more trends right here. So there are two periods we measure here, 1951 to 1960, and then 2012 to 2021. And we found that mosquitoes' ability to transmit dengue, that's increased 48%. And that arrow, notice, is pointing up. So we expect the trajectory to continue. The ability to transmit malaria has increased 38%. The mosquitoes' reproductive number grew 64%. So not only are they living perhaps through seasons longer and more effectively, because of that, we're seeing more and more of the mosquitoes. And wow, our area is all about water. So we got to talk about waterborne disease as well. This can be from contaminated water, from drinking water, things like that. Of course, a lot of us get in the water here. We're all about the beach and our beautiful water systems we have here. So increased water temperature as the world warms and the climate warms, our water warms as well. It holds most of the heat on our planet. So it enhances the growth and survival of pathogens like the Vibrio. Are you familiar with the Vibrio bacteria? We'll talk more about that, but warmer water leads to higher concentrations of these. So this is something that is also something that needs to be tracked really closely and is incredibly interesting for the future of our health. Rise in extreme weather events. This is a year like no other we've seen this. We've just seen it all, from the flooding rains and hurricanes, and it's just been a lot. So it's extreme rainfall, it's heavy rainfall, it's rainfall like we've never seen before. It's overwhelmed our storm runoff systems, our water treatment and sewage. Helene alone dumped 50 million gallons of raw sewage into our water bodies. You guys all heard that story, I'm sure. It's heartbreaking, and that's a tough one. And on a couple of these slides, I just want us to ask some questions and think about this a little bit. But you know, we want progress and we love development, but we want to try to do it in a responsible way, in a way that protects our future, in a way that makes Sarasota and Southwest Florida continue to be this amazing place. So we got to ask: are we sizing our infrastructure? And when we do things, are we sizing it for we expect now and what we expect, or what's happening now and what we expect in the future, or is it based on historical data and historical experiences? Because that's not what we're seeing anymore. We're seeing change out there, and you're all feeling that as well. Mold. Got to talk about mold. It's a big one, especially after the flooding and the hurricanes. We've seen so much mold. It can spread on the drywall, but not just on drywall. We see that in all the photos, but it can spread on wood, insulation, in the flooring. So, you know, a lot of times you see just the lower part of the drywall cut out, but water can get there and mold can develop in a lot of hidden places, causes respiratory issues, allergies, asthma flare-ups. It's a real problem. And it can grow so quickly, 24 to 48 hours, it's out of control. And that's when there's no air conditioning, it's hot, you know, the electricity's out after a flood or hurricane event. So mold is a real concern. And I found this not overly surprising, but a little bit stunning. It was to see this number. After a home has surge flooding from a hurricane or tropical storm, 3 out of 4, 75% of them, they tested positive for mold. So it's almost a given you're going to have mold if you have flooding. Also, it's having significant impact on our infrastructure. I mentioned this a little bit ago, but you know, it's causing system failures. We're just not made for this much water, and we're really not made, our infrastructure, for this many people. So here's another question to ask. You know, before we focus too hard on new development and new condos, should we first make sure we're set up, you know, almost fail-safe for what's going on and what we expect to happen? I think that's an important question. This one is terrifying. The flesh-eating bacteria. And this is a real problem. I mean, has anybody ever dipped their foot in the Gulf? Everybody, right? You go boat, you jump in, throw the football, whatever, anchor. It's incredible. Maybe you have a little scratch on your ankle. Okay, but If this gets into you, it can really it can take your life. It's unbelievable. Vibrio vulnificus. It sounds like a Harry Potter spell, doesn't it? Vibrio. It's unreal. When you look at this, what it can do, it's incredible. We've seen an 8-fold rise of this from 1988 to 2018 on the East Coast of the United States. 8-fold, and it's going to go up. I'm going to share, there's a lot of pictures I could have shared. Bob was like, you can't show that picture, Rick. They're about to have lunch. This one is pretty minor, so I think we can handle this. I got the latest numbers this morning. In 2024 so far, Florida's seen 80 cases and 16 deaths from people dipping their foot in the water. So you go watch the sunset and the water splashes up on your ankle and you got that little scratch from your dog. You never know. So it's pretty frightening. Last year we had 63 cases and 11 deaths. Do you see a trend there? I don't know if it's more people have gotten in the water this year or if the water's warmer. We've seen record warmth. Vibrio loves warm water, and there you go. This is a screenshot from a news broadcast, and you can see some of the symptoms. Vomiting, diarrhea, blisters, ulcers, and as we mentioned, it can get even worse than that. So let's summarize. We took in a lot of information there, and we're going to get medical on you here in just a minute. But the warming climate, we know is going to significantly change the distribution, the prevalence of the vector-borne diseases. So this is something we know is happening. You know it's happening. You know the threats. Things we can do and need to do, we need a coordinated effort. So that's data collection, as all the doctors have mentioned. Data is king, right? We have data, we can make informed decisions. So that's really important. Improve surveillance, and this would be vector surveillance. Getting an idea of where the mosquito population is and how bad it is. And there are things they do. They will go out and trap mosquitoes, and then they'll inspect them to see if they have malaria or dengue fever or anything in them. So improve surveillance and sharing of that information. Enhance vector control strategies. Of course, spraying. We mentioned that. It's a chemical spray, and no one loves that. There are things, getting rid of standing water, trying to control that. Things like that will help. But I think a whole lot of research and thought leaders need to jump in on how we can control the vector population that we have out there. Investment in the public health infrastructure. And that's not necessarily government money. It could be the private sector and this world coming together. But some people definitely need to take the lead on that. And when we educate you of the threat and you give this a voice, that's when things like that start to happen, because these people in the private sector or in the government, the city leaders, they know people care. It's an issue to them. And when you guys care and you make noise, that's when you get action. And then the right sizing infrastructure, and what I mean by that is, that stormwater runoff. Look at these neighborhoods that are flooding. The new neighborhoods never flooded before, and no one imagined we would see 20 inches of rain, and they're underwater. There are people right now still underwater from Milton. This morning, they're still underwater, whole neighborhoods. They can't get the water to go away, so they're pumping them out. They got pumps in and trying to get rid of them. So it's not, as Bob mentioned, we're being too reactive and not proactive. We need to get proactive. We need to educate. Community engagement like we're doing today, it's crucial. We really got to do that, and that's why we're having this conference. That's why you're here today, and we definitely thank all of you for that. That's my speech. I'm no doctor, but hopefully you learned something right there about the warming climate and this medical threat. Thank you.